talk to as many pilots and industry professionals as you can, because Google is great for getting answers, but you won't get insights from Google like you will from people.
How many people go through life doing work they really don't like, but every day dreaming of, say, working in the aviation industry? They say it's too late. They think it would be too hard. They think it would go against conventional norms. If you never go after what you want, you'll never have it. This is Fly the Transition. Join us as we soar through the captivating stories of individuals embracing a thrilling journey into the aviation industry. From pilots spreading their wings to mechanics fine-tuning the engines and a myriad of industry professionals, each with a unique tale to tell. Get ready to dive into the diverse backgrounds, the pivotal moments that propelled their leap, and the sheer determination that transformed their aspirations into reality. We're not just about dreams. We're about making them take flight. Welcome to Fly the Transition. And now your host, Jim Schilling.
Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Fly the Transition. I am your host, Jim Schilling. It has been far too long since our last episode. I'm so excited to be back. And this time we're joined by CFI and content creator Trent from the YouTube channel Fly with Trent. Alrighty, so as we jump into this episode, I want to talk a bit about where I've been, what I've been up to, and just the whirlwind of training and all of the things that made things slow down for the podcast once again. So in our last episode of Fly the Transition, I talked about the change from the CFI practical testing standards to now using the airman certification standards, which has been pretty common across the board for all the other basic ratings that you're going to get as a pilot. Your private pilot, your instrument, your commercial, they've all been using the ACS for some time. And I went into a tiny bit of panic mode when I was seeing the news that CFI was now moving to the ACS standard versus the PTS standard. Realistically, as I slowed down and I worked through the material, saw what the differences were, there's not a whole lot of major differences between the PTS and the ACS for CFI. There are a couple other things that you have to demonstrate now. Some things have been cleaned up. So the document itself is actually shorter, but I, by no stretch of the imagination, take that to mean that this is going to be any easier of a check ride than what the CFI check ride is. For those of you who listen to the Flying Midwest podcast, I did talk there about how even though this isn't a drastic change within the standards, it did serve as a bit of a kick in the pants for me to stop dragging my feet with this CFI business and really get after things. So I've increased the amount of lessons I've been doing per week, trying to schedule 2 to 3 lessons a week when I can. But I've also been writing a lot of lesson plans in the background so that when those lessons pop up, I have material that I can cover. And in short order within some of my planning, I covered one of my favorite topics, which is night operation and just the whole science of our eyeballs and the visual illusions and some of my personal experiences that I can share, both good and bad, that can be lessons learned for a potential student. So not only do I find those parts of night operations interesting, but man, night operations and flying at night are some of the best times to fly. So I loved writing and presenting that lesson plan. I think that's going to be one of my favorites to teach on the ground, as well as sharing that experience as a student first takes flight at night and can see some of the awesome views that are available to us, as well as that really nice smooth night air. But also in this space, we're covering VORs, which admittedly was one of my Achilles heels as I was going through my private training. It was a little difficult for me to wrap my mind around some of the concepts of where I was in space as I looked at the VOR instrument versus where that VOR is on the ground and where I fit into that space. So I'm a little apprehensive about my ability to now take what I do know and translate that into something that a student can understand. And maybe I'm overthinking it just because I struggled with that personally in my private pilot training. But at the end of the day, I think that in any teaching or learning experience like this, we're all going to have things that we are good at versus things we struggle with a little bit. So I will probably just give myself a little bit of grace. We'll write out this lesson plan and we'll see how I do once we get this in front of students. So with all that flight training stuff and a busy work schedule, I just haven't had an opportunity to push out an episode of this podcast. So as I mentioned last month when I pushed last month when I pushed out the last episode. The scheduling might be just a little bit more sporadic. I want to have a consistent schedule as far as pushing this podcast out, but I also have to prioritize some things in life as far as my family and work and training and all that stuff. So fear not, this podcast is not going anywhere. I've got a lot of content ready to go that I just have to do some editing with and push out. So thank you all for your patience. I do appreciate every one of you who listens, and just know that we've got a lot more inspiring journeys to share with you coming up in the future here. So on to this episode of the podcast, we're going to talk with Trent from the YouTube channel Fly with Trent. Trent is not only a YouTube content creator, but he's also a successful CFI, and he's working his way towards a career in commercial aviation. If you are part of this crowd who's looking to change careers, have a career 2.0, you should really check out his channel. He does talk about some of the costs associated, his own journey, some of the tips and tricks he has picked up along the way, and a lot more. So if you have not checked that channel out, over on YouTube, Fly with Trent, we will have some links and all that stuff down in the show notes. The first video of his that caught my attention as I was scrolling through the YouTube space was a video titled, "Is 53 Too Old to Become an Airline Pilot?" He put that out about a year ago, and he's had a lot of really great success, not just with his YouTube channel, but also with his flight instructing. So we'll talk about that part of his journey, but we'll also talk about his success in business before that, how sometimes the heroes behind our success are our families at home, as well as some other tips on networking to help you be successful in your journey to a new career in aviation. So I have Trent with me tonight. Thank you for joining me on the Fly the Transition podcast. I'm really excited to have you here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
Yeah. You've been pretty busy on, YouTube yourself, so I appreciate you taking the time. So let's talk a bit about how you first got exposed to aviation.
Top Gun, 1986. My dad was a pilot, but I was, knee high to a grasshopper.
Yeah.
I was too young. I didn't know. And he wasn't a pilot for very long, so that wasn't it. But it was Top Gun. I walked out of that theater and I was like, I want to be a fighter pilot. That looks cool. And so that stuck with, so I was 16 at the time. And so I got my private pilot's license. Before I got my private pilot's license, I applied to the Canadian military to be a pilot, and went through all the initial phases. And this is probably in 1990, I think. So I was about 20 years old. So I got through Aircrew Selection Center.
Okay.
And at the end of a week of, being a guinea pig and having a needle stuck in your head and eyes checked, and you measure from your hips to your knees and the whole thing, like, are you going to rip your kneecaps off during injection?
Yeah.
They sit you all down in the room, and they basically have this guy up at the front who's got a clipboard, and he reads off last names, and he either says pilot, navigator, or both, if you have qualified to be either or.
Okay.
And he gets to my name and he says navigator. And it was like, what? And I just about threw up on the floor. And so that was it. The dream was gone, supposedly, because there was no way I was going to go ride around the back of an airplane.
Sure. Yeah.
So long story short, I, about 3 or 4 months later, harassed the local recruiting officer. Major Savage was his name. And it's a long story. I could bore you with it, but the long and the short of it is, I wouldn't leave his office until he figured out a way to get me back to Aircrew Selection Center. And he said, well, no one ever gets a second chance. And I just wouldn't take no for an answer. So he started making phone calls, and on about phone call number 6, I heard him say, oh, I didn't know that. And I thought, well, there we go. That's my in. So he said, go get your private pilot's license and come back, and we'll consider your file. Will go before a committee, and we'll consider sending you back. So I did. I got my private license, when I was 20 or 21. I did it in the bare minimum number of hours. Like, I was literally circling the airport to get to hour number 45 or whatever it was we needed in Canada.
Okay.
So my file went before the committee. They approved it. I went back to Aircrew Selection Center. The thing that I had, it was called the VGAT trainer. I struggled with it. I absolutely aced it when I went back. Qualified pilot or nav, got accepted, went to basic training. And as luck would have it, budget cutbacks came in, so that was the end that was the end of my career of aspiring to be a fighter jet pilot. So then, yeah, right.
Well, I'd like to ask you a bit about So you went and got your private certificate in Canada then. Is there much difference in how the system works in Canada for getting your private versus the United States?
Not really.
Okay.
No, there's 5 hours difference. I forget what I should know this because I'm a CFI, but yeah, I think
It'll be our secret.
40 hours.
I won't share it.
40 hours required by Canada and 45 by the US or vice versa. I know I'm going to get roasted in the comments for this, but I'm not a walking encyclopedia.
I would love to like fact check you and go, no, it's this, Trent. But admittedly, now I'm questioning which one it is. So,
yeah, right.
As your bubbles burst, so to speak, by the military in Canada, it sounds like you did okay for yourself and went into business.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I didn't shoot the lights out. I mean, yes, I did okay. It's funny when you get into business and you have some success, you start comparing. If you're a type A personality like I am, you compare yourself to the people who are on the covers of magazines. And so compared to those people, I didn't make the cover of magazines, but I do have a couple of Inc. 5000 plaques on my wall. There's a top 40 under 40 business in Vancouver entrepreneur. So, I won some awards. I sold a couple of companies. I got a 7-figure net worth and, I did okay, but I didn't become a gazillionaire.
Well, 40 under 40 for anything is nothing to really sneeze at, though.
No, right? I mean, it's on the wall still, so I'm proud of it for sure.
So what kind of business were you doing that at the time? Did you get into a little bit of everything, or was there something specific?
I've had a number of companies. So my very first company was a technology services company. It's actually still in business to this day. I just don't own it anymore. And did that one for about 8 years. And that was really my because I didn't go to college, but that company was like my undergrad and my graduate degree in business because I learned a lot.
Okay.
Sold that one when I was 38, retired for a while, a couple of years, and then found my way onto the internet, kind of by accident, to be honest with you. But once I discovered the internet, I got hooked. And so
the internet does that to people, though, I think.
Yeah. Well, especially, this is back in like 2010. So this is like early internet.
Sure.
And so I did a variety of things. I had a pretty successful blog. I did 600 plus episodes of a podcast. Had a couple of marketing agencies. And then I had the thing that got the Inc. 5000 plaques on the wall. I started this Amazon reseller business where we'd partner with brands and resell their products on Amazon.
Okay.
And that was not the first, but that one was the first one that sort of in that niche made me a tiny bit famous on social media because I had a lot of success with it. And then that led to, speaking at conferences and stuff like that. And then that led to my owning a software company, which I still own. And that one was, software is no joke. Don't go into software software is not for the faint of heart. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
It is wildly more difficult than any other business for a whole host of reasons that you probably don't want to get into on this show. But man, the company was quite successful in the first couple of years, but then some things happened and it sort of growth just sort of stalled. We never raised money from venture capitalists like a lot of our competitors did. I should have. That was absolutely an error on my part. And if I had done that, maybe I wouldn't be a pilot today. Maybe I'd be running, maybe I would have flamed out, or maybe I would have been a wildly successful software CEO.
Sure.
Instead of a guy that owns a little software company.
At what point do you start turning towards aviation again? I mean, has it always been in the background, or is it something that you decided one day that, this is it, I need to go after this, or I'm not going to, type of thing?
Yeah, honestly, it was spring break of this year. I was down with my wife and my daughter in San Diego visiting a friend, and we had just, because of the 2 years of relative no growth with the software business, I kind of got burned out. And so I started a waste management company because I thought enough with the internet. I'm going to go offline where I can see my customers face to face.
Sure. And
the waste management company started off really strong, but there was one competitor here in the Boise market that had been here longer than us. And they had in what we did, they were the only supplier. So of course they loved it. When we came along and started stealing accounts from them, they did not like that very much.
Sure they didn't.
And so they immediately started a price war to get those accounts back. And having sold, tens of millions of stuff on Amazon, I know what price wars do. And I was like, you can have it. I'm out. And so we were in spring break when I got the news of this price war starting, because we just signed an account that we'd stole from them, then they stole it back. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I've seen this movie before. And so we're sitting there on the beach, and we're visiting with a friend, and you know, he was explaining how his life was kind of cush these days. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, man, in business wise, I've like kicked this guy's butt my entire life. And suddenly now he looks like his life's easier than mine. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And so my wife said, well, you know, what are you going to do? Do you want to start another company? I'm like, no, I have no interest in doing another startup. She goes, you want to buy one? I'm like, we've looked at a bunch, but nah, I don't feel it right now. Like, I just want to I want to do something where I'm getting relatively immediate gratification each day that I do it.
Yeah.
And I've had pretty good success as a real estate investor. And I want to complement whatever that is. I want it to allow me to buy more real estate. And she goes, why don't you go be a pilot? You're always in your flight simulator in your office screwing around. And of course, as luck would have it, you know, we've got this big pilot shortage.
Right.
I have friends that are pilots. So I reached out to a few of them and I'm like, I'm 53. Like, aren't I a little late in the game for this? And they're like, no way, dude. Like, this is a time like no other in aviation. First of all, pilots are retiring in these huge waves. So the airlines are desperate for pilots. And for the first time in history, you can start off and make basically close to $100,000 in your first year. If you live in your base, like, you know, if you don't have to commute via an airplane to your base, if you just drive to the airport, it's a part-time job. And I was like, so let me get this right. So let's say I go be an airline pilot. I work, 80 hours a month and I make $150,000 within, by year 2. That leaves me a lot. That gives me two things. One, it gives me a W-2, which banks love lending money to you.
Yeah,
when
right.
you're an employee, way more than they like lending money to you when you're a business owner.
Right.
So I'm thinking, well, I could get loans like crazy to buy real estate. I'd have extra time to go buy more real estate. Yeah, I'm going to do that because I could do this flying thing as like into my 70s if I go corporate after the airlines.
Right.
As a corporate pilot, working on day rates, I could still make pretty darn good money as long as I want to keep flying. It would still be part-time. I'd kind of be in charge of my own schedule, and I could keep on buying real estate on the side. And suddenly that really appealed to me. And so I decided to go for it.
So I want to talk a bit about the real estate side. So have you been doing like real estate investing the whole time as well? Like as you've been working through business or?
No, my real estate background is not particularly extraordinary. We've owned rental houses.
Okay.
But then when I started to when I had that Amazon reseller business, I needed a warehouse because I had a lot of inventory.
Okay.
And so we were renting this space in some other guy's building, and we outgrew it. And so I said to the broker, I said, I need you to find me another place to move my business into. I said, but you know what I really like? I really like to just buy a building and then have other tenants in the building. So as luck would have it, it was a 18,000 square foot warehouse, multi-tenant light industrial building came up for sale. And so I bought it, and it was an absolute piece of junk. Like the guy that owned it acquired it because someone owed him money. They defaulted, so he took the building. So there'd been no maintenance. None of the tenants were on triple net leases. They were all month to month. They were all well below market. And my wife and I very naively thought, well, how hard can this be? And so we bought it, we moved into it. And then we proceeded to inform the tenants that, hey guys, you've been getting a pretty good deal here for the last couple of years,
right.
But you kind of need to pay market rent. And I just assumed that they would all grumble and moan a bit and then pay market rent. They all moved out. Every one of them. They were so pissed off that the new owners, the new nasty owners, had the nerve to raise rents. They were like, oh, I'll show you. And they all left. So we had to manage tenant turnover. It took about a year to turn over all the tenants. we had to invest quite a bit of money in, basically the building was really janky before, like there'd be a bathroom way down over here, and these 3 tenants would go down this long skinny hall to get to the bathroom. Like it was a joke.
Yeah.
So fortunately, thanks to my success of my Amazon reseller business, I had plenty of cash on hand, and so we fixed the thing. And then about 2 years later, we sold it for substantially more than we paid for it, almost 7 figures more than we paid for it. And I thought to myself, well, that really wasn't that hard. Maybe I could do that again. So between, that experience and just the desire to own more rental properties, more residential rental, be it apartments or fourplexes or houses or whatever, that's what I'm intending on doing more of in the future.
So you also do content creation right now, and you put out a lot of videos, not just about your own flying, but it sounds like you've been interviewing other pilots about their journey as well. So I want to talk a bit about your channel, but not just that, but how you kind of went through your ratings really quickly as this goal to achieve your dreams of becoming a pilot.
Yeah, so I've never been a particularly patient person. I'm more like a shoot first, aim later, which has its pros and its cons. Yeah. But I had a mentor here in Boise, a friend of mine who's been in business a long time. He's about the same age as me. And I said to him, hey, look, this is kind of what I want to do. And so he gave me the name of a school out east. He said, you should go here. That's where I went. They've got some good accelerated programs. And so I did. I went to that school, and I was able to, and for basically for 90, so I loaded up my RV. I left my family behind. I went. They joined me a month after I left because it was going to be summertime at that point, since my daughter wasn't in school.
Sure.
But in 91 days, excluding days lost to weather, I took 1 day off.
Wow.
But other than that, a typical day, if I didn't get weathered out, was wake up, go to the airport, fly, study ground, do a simulator ride, study more ground, go back up in the air, fly again, come home, eat dinner, study more ground. It was a intense experience, to say the least.
Yeah.
And at the time, I wasn't doing it because I was trying to get famous on YouTube.
Oh,
that was a very unintended consequence. Yeah. I was doing it because I just didn't want to waste any time. I just wanted to go be an airline pilot. And it all started, and because I've been this content creator with moderate success, to be honest with you. I mean, yeah, I've produced 650 episodes of podcast, and I got lots of downloads, and I've made other videos, and I got millions of views, but there's lots of people who got a lot more than I did. Mm-hmm. It only seemed natural to me I should see if this works. And so I put up this video, is 53 too old to be an airline pilot? And what's the conventional wisdom? In the pilot community, like every community, there are your cheerleaders and your trolls.
Yep.
And everybody's an armchair pilot or an armchair quarterback. And so when this, 53-year-old dude puts up this video, the know-it-alls took great pleasure in telling me what an idiot I was, and that I was too late, and I was dreaming, and blah, 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 blah. And I just thought to myself, bring it on, boys, because you know what you're doing? You're feeding the YouTube algorithm,
right? Because
you're commenting a lot on my video. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, there was a greater number of cheerleaders. In the beginning, it was, I don't remember the exact ratio, but let's call it 60-40 cheerleaders to trolls. And there were people who were like, this is awesome. I want to follow your journey. I'm in a similar place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that video got, I don't remember what it was in the first 2 weeks, but let's call it somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 views, which shocked the heck out of me, because normally my videos wouldn't get that many views that quickly. And so then I was like, okay, so for background, I have 10 years experience at writing headlines, writing subject lines on emails, split testing, copywriting, YouTubing. Like, I'm not a marketing neophyte. Like, I have quite a bit of experience.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna put a sensational, controversial headline on this next video and see what happens. And the video title was my 18-month plan to make 6 figures as an airline pilot starting at 53 or something like that. That video blew up, like 100,000 views in, I don't know, 2 weeks, something like that. Or I forget what it was. It was a ton, to the point where, like, at the flight school, everyone was saying, "Hey man, saw your video." And like, it was in everybody's feed at the flight school. And people were now showing up to this flight school saying, "I'm here because of your video." And that was crazy to me. And that was when I realized, oh, apparently I'm not the only dude in his late 40s or early 50s who'd like to go fly airplanes because it's more fun than flying a desk. And that one had a lot more cheerleaders and a lot less trolls, but there was still people who were like, "You're dreaming, you're just, you're getting high on your own supply, blah, blah, blah." And I get really motivated by naysayers. So then I just decided to myself, all right, I'm going to make a game out of this, and I'm going to keep adding as much value as I can to the people who are my core audience, which is guys like me and you. And if I can do just that, that would be great. But if I can also prove all these other a-holes wrong, that'll make it even more fun. And so that video, I think I had said something along the lines of it was going to take me about 6 months and 50 grand or 60 grand. I don't remember the exact number, that I'd said, this is what I'm going to do. And people are like, "Yeah, ha, 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 sure, you're going to do that." Well, I beat it. So I recorded another video basically saying I came in under time and under budget.
Yeah.
Now the trolls are really having a hard time busting my nuts. So it's been fun, and I've continued to produce videos, and now, much to my surprise, I'm making 5 figures a month on YouTube, and I'm signing affiliate deals with flight schools. I'm about to sign my second one with a school. I'm getting checks from these schools because people are getting referred by me to the schools. And suddenly now it's like this whole other source of income that I didn't see coming at all.
You didn't prep for that at all, did you? Just kind of fell into it.
No. There was no business plan. There was no grand strategy. There was none of that. It was Trent threw up a video. It was popular. I threw up another one. It got even more popular, and I was smart enough to keep going.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I know that for me, like, the first one of your videos that I saw was the one you're talking about, where you're talking about, your, 18-month plan or something like that. That's the first one that popped onto mine. And at that point, I think that this podcast had kind of started and stopped at that point, just because of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the background. I think I sent it to you, but like I had another podcast I was working on, and I work full time. I've got a family. I've got a daughter that dances. It feels like 8 days a week, and it's a lot, So for me, this video pops up. I'm like, this is right up my alley of just my interest in these stories. So my journey with aviation, I know, is going to stall out at CFI just based on my medical. So I won't get as first class, but I'm working towards my CFI rating. With my plan being, once I'm done with, I'm in a career where I can retire somewhere between 50 and 55. And at that point, I'll jump into flight instructing as my plan.
Yeah, why not?
So when your video pops up, I'm like, oh, this is totally up my alley. So I checked that one out, and just seeing how you fast track through these is really inspiring, I think, just for a lot of people that are wondering if they can do this too.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who is as motivated as I am and has the financial wherewithal and the support of their spouse, and the aptitudes, I realize I'm an edge case.
Sure.
So yeah, in theory, anybody could do what I did. In reality, few people can do what I did, because either they don't have the supportive spouse, or they don't have the money, or they can't quit their job, or they don't have, I have a pretty good aptitude in airplanes. I just learn things quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have all of that to be able to do what I did. And so it's not like, I recognize that, there's a hype aspect to my videos, but at the end of the day, they're backed by substance and quality and value, because people wouldn't keep watching them and I wouldn't get all the wonderful comments that I do.
Right.
But I understand what I need to put on the thumbnail to make YouTube show it to as many people as possible. And let's face it, the more people that see it, the more people that are going to be inspired. Yeah, they might not do it in 90 days, but maybe they can do it in 6 months.
Yeah.
but they could still do it. And that's the point.
Just that inspiring of others is kind of what I really like about your channel and channels like that. So with your training, so you mentioned that you're a CFI now. I assume that you're at a point where you're still just building the hours to make it to the airlines. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm a third the way there. I'm at about 550 hours.
Okay.
So I fly quite a bit. My YouTube channel feeds me a never-ending supply of students.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. People come to, it blows my mind. People travel to Boise and live here to train with me.
Wow.
Like, why? There's CFIs all over the place. But I've asked them and they said, because you seem like a really authentic guy. You seem like you'd be a really great teacher. I like your demeanor. Okay, great. Come here. And I've met some really, really cool people who have become my students. And because you think my students who are doing what I did, relocating, generally they're pretty successful at what they were doing beforehand.
Right.
And so those are really interesting people for me to get to know. And I feel very, very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in to have them want to come and train with me. And that's super duper cool.
Yeah, that is really cool that people have sought you out and come all the way out to Idaho to come fly with you. That's really neat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
So with your channel, and one of the reasons I reached out to you too is you're starting to have more conversations with other pilots too. And presenting that to people. So are there certain things that you're picking up through those conversations or learning that you find beneficial to others or like really key points to pass along?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like what I'm trying to do with the interviews I've been doing lately is shine a light on the lesser known paths from 250 hours to making a good living as a professional pilot. Because everybody knows you can go be a CFI and then you can join the airlines. Like there's nothing really terribly interesting about that story because it's well known.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe my audience already knew the things that I'm discovering by doing the interviews, but I don't think so because the feedback I get on the videos is pretty good and they get a lot of views. So I'm guessing, people are learning a lot. There are other paths, there's other opportunities, survey pilot, ferry pilot, corporate pilot, day rates, how much money you can make as a corporate pilot, all that kind of stuff is fascinating to me because it helps me to understand what I should be doing with my career.
Sure.
And, hey, why not record these conversations and share what I'm learning with other people, which, after 650 some episodes of a podcast, it gets pretty easy for me to do because I've had a lot of practice.
Right. So in those conversations, have you thought about other avenues other than just the CFI work to build those hours?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I interviewed a guy who was a survey pilot in caravans.
Okay.
And his work was 30 days on, 30 days off. So the key thing about a caravan, it's a turbine engine. And, as a CFI, yes, I can log time very quickly. And because I'm not being paid by a flight school where they're keeping most of the money, I actually get paid quite well to be a CFI.
Sure.
But I'm not logging multi, at least not yet, because most insurance companies, for you to be a multi-instructor, you got a bit more time than I have.
Sure.
And I'm also definitely not logging turbine time. So how can I go and get that time? And when I interviewed, I believe his name was Joe, and he mentioned to me, he's flying caravans. Suddenly I was like, ooh, okay, so tell me about this survey pilot gig. And so that's something that I would absolutely consider doing. Like if I could, I'm in an arrangement now where there's 3 of us that kind of work for this one. We work in a group. There's a couple of aircraft that we share. So it's totally conceivable that if this company decided to extend me an offer to do 30 days on and 30 days off flying around in a caravan, I could still teach students. And when I'm away for 30 days, those students could do flights according to my syllabus with the other instructors. Yep. And then I could come back and pick it up. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know, because they don't have an open position. This particular company doesn't have an open position at this point in time. So it's an idea, but is it going to ever be reality for me? I don't know. And I keep my students abreast of all this stuff. And I would, the last thing I would do is, have someone come here and then say, surprise,
Right.
I'm actually not going to be. Like, that's not me. I wouldn't do that.
Welcome to Idaho. Enjoy your time. I'll see you later.
Yeah. When I make so if that was a real option, then I'd make sure that I finished any commitments I had with students that were here, and for any that were coming, I would say, so if you're going to come here, understand that you're going to fly with me every second month, and yada yada yada. So I think I could do it, because I did ask a couple of my students after doing that interview. I said, so if it was my syllabus and you were training with me like half the time, and then the other half the time you were going to train with Jeff, would that be a big issue? And they're like, no, I think that'd be fine. So I think most people would be, agreeable to that, as long as they knew in advance that was what the expectation was going to be.
I think you probably heard, it's probably all too common that you have these instructors, they hit 1,500 hours or they get a different opportunity and poof, they're just gone.
Well, yeah, but can you blame them?
No, I can't at all. But at the same time, from your perspective, if you have guys reaching out to you because of they see you on the internet or they see you on YouTube and they're like, that's a guy I want to learn from. I think it's really neat that you've taken the time to explain to them, like, hey, like, this could be another thing where we split the time between me and this other instructor. Is that cool with you? I mean, you're open about it right out the gate.
Yeah, I'm very transparent with all of my students. And when I'm getting close to the 1,500 hour mark, that'll be the very first part of the conversation. Yeah, you can come and train with me, but
just,
the day that SkyWest says your class is starting, I'm out of here and I won't be back.
Yeah.
So, that would not come as a surprise to anyone. I would have disclosed that well in advance.
I really like that. So before we get back to this interview, a quick word from those who make the Fly the Transition podcast possible. Aviation friends, are you looking for eyewear that's as adventurous as you are? Look no further than Flying Eyes Optics. Their ultralight, comfortable, and durable glasses and sunglasses are perfect for pilots. They are designed by pilots, for pilots, and for my money, they're the best aviation eyewear that I have ever had. If you or that special pilot in your life are interested in Flying Eyes, check out our affiliate link down in the show notes and use code FlyingMidwest10 and you can get 10% off your next purchase at Flying Eyes. Are you ready to gear up for your summer adventures? We'll dive into the skies with Pilot Quarters, your go-to destination for stylish aviation apparel. From breezy camp shirts to vibrant sporty polo shirts, Pilot Quarters has everything you need to get ready for summer. So head on over to pilotquarters.com today and soar in style.
You're listening to Fly the Transition. If you've ever thought about changing careers and getting into the aviation industry, welcome to your new home. Now, back to your host, Jim Schilling.
With your prior business experience and real estate experience, things like that, are there certain things that you find to be more transferable as far as your skills into aviation as opposed to others?
I would say that the most transferable skill for me, and I spent a long time developing this skill, and it's been absolutely applicable to my role as a flight instructor, is my brain is very process oriented. My software company is process management software. I was so successful on Amazon because I documented all of my processes, and then I hired a team in the Philippines to follow those processes and execute and do all these things.
Yeah.
So that whole just thinking about systems and procedures, obviously that's a big part of aviation.
Oh, sure.
Checklists in aviation. So I bring that to my role as a flight instructor. Like all of my students, the syllabus lives in my software. They know exactly what lesson we're on. They know what the next lesson is. They know what the corresponding ground school lessons to go with that flight lesson are. I don't think a lot of people do things that way. I think there's a lot of, shooting it from the hip kind of thing, or just doing it based upon my guts and experience. And,
sure.
And, hey, if you have enough experience, I'm not saying that you're not good at it, but as a new flight instructor, there's just so much stuff that you have to know and understand and memorize and so forth. And as I mentioned, I'm not a walking encyclopedia. So put simply, I like to write stuff down and then follow my own instructions. Your
software development stuff kind of begged an interesting question for me. Is that something where you would think about taking your CFI materials and making a school out of it? Or is that something you've considered?
Of course, I've considered it. These playbooks that I have developed, I call them workflows, actually, not playbooks. So a workflow is just a fancy name for a checklist that is in software.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of features and functions in and around that checklist that make it interactive and useful for all parties that are involved. And I've said on previous interviews and so forth that, if anyone wants to sign up for Flowster, the software, I'm very happy to give you a copy. I've got an instrument training workflow, a private pilot training workflow. And just today I finished my commercial pilot training workflow. I'm happy to give those away to people who to other CFIs who want to use Flowster. And I'm also, because I know that CFIs are grossly underpaid, I'm also happy to give a pretty healthy discount on the cost of Flowster's software. So if they just want to reach out to me, they can get me at trentd@flowster.app, or you can hit me up on social media. I'll make sure that you get set up with it.
Well, that's really neat. As an aspiring CFI myself, that's something that as I'm putting together my lesson plans, it's like, am I doing this in the most, efficient way possible for my students in the future, things like that. So, and I too have thought about, do I make this all like Google Sheets and go, here's the lesson plan for this, take a look at it, or is there another way to do that? So I certainly am exploring that avenue myself. So
yeah, if you go to the Fly with Trent website and you look at the Train with Trent page, on that page, you'll find a link to an example of my instrument workflow, and you can see it's a lot more than what you could ever do in a Google Doc.
Yeah, I'm totally going to check that out later tonight. There is something I want to go back to that I think we covered briefly, but I want to make sure that I give this, the right amount of room to breathe here as far as a concept. But as you're making that change, I know that you said you took your RV, you went out to the school. What kind of challenges did you face through that? Obviously being away from your family, but what other challenges were present for you?
I'm not going to say that I didn't find flight school challenging, but I'm so accustomed, as a startup entrepreneur, I'm accustomed to being challenged at a level that the average Joe just has no idea what stress is, because startups are just so hard. So relative to startup life, flight school was a walk in the park.
I suppose it doesn't hurt having a supportive family at home that understands what's going on too. And it sounds like you talked about that earlier, that like your wife was on board from the get-go, like of trying to help you figure out what direction you were going to go with your career. So
yeah, the untold story of the whole going back east is my wife was the hero, not me, because for 2 months, we had no social life, and she was with our daughter all day long, every day. She was away from her friends, away from her gym. She was also transitioning from working in our family business to getting a job. So she had to look for a job while she was there. So all she was doing all day, every day was playing mom and looking for a job and buying groceries and doing laundry. And she did that for 2 months without her network of friends and without her being able to go to the gym. And I had something to do every day. I had something that was fun to go do. So it was way harder on her than it was on me. And that's why I think she's the true hero and not me.
I love that answer.
That's true.
Unsung heroes is correct.
Absolutely.
So what does the path forward look like for you? Not just with the YouTube channel, but moving towards your career in aviation? Well,
at this point, my plan A really hasn't changed. When I started this, I was like, I'm going to go be a CFI, and then I'm going to go work for SkyWest because I'm in their Pathways program.
Okay.
I think they're a great company. They have a fabulous reputation. They don't do furloughs. They've got a huge fleet of aircraft and bases. There's a base here in the town that I live in. So my plan A has not changed. That's the plan. Be a CFI, get through my hours as quickly as possible. My guess is I'll probably be at 1,500 hours by June of next year, maybe July. Depends on what the weather's like in the next 2 months.
Yep.
But I remain open to, the more people that I interview, the more content that I produce, the more opportunities that I could never have otherwise sourced or predicted come my way. So, as an example, maybe one day some guy who owns some big company and he's got a bunch of jets, or he runs a Part 135 or whatever, stumbles across one of my videos. He's like, I like that guy. He's going to come work for me. And he makes me some offer that's so freaking good that I just literally can't say no to it.
Right.
That's another reason why I create content, is it is the best networking tool on planet Earth.
100%.
Because you're letting the whole world know what you're up to. You're letting the whole world sample your personality, and they get to see what you like. And that's why, I get people like yesterday, I received a $2,500 deposit from someone that I think maybe I had a single email with. And why they do that is because they've sat and watched a whole bunch of my videos And on their own, they've like, no, I'm gonna fly with that guy. And it was the same when I was in business. I mean, I sold millions of dollars worth of stuff to people I never met because they'd been listening to my show for 4 years or 6 years.
Yeah.
And they just trusted me, and they knew that they weren't going to get screwed when they bought my stuff.
Well, I think that probably speaks to your character and abilities as well, that you're not just successful within business, but now you're successful with this new venture with your YouTube channel with Aviation. And I imagine you'll probably be successful with getting into SkyWest as well. So
yeah, it was. I'm definitely known within SkyWest. I was on one of their pilot pathway webinars. There's like 400 other pilots on the webinar, and some guy put something, and I put in the comments, I wrote ha 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 because it was funny whatever he said. And the webinar host, he goes, "Oh, hey, Trent from Fly with Trent's here with us today," and I was like, "What?"
Yeah, that's crazy.
So they know who I am.
So I think you can find this answer on your YouTube channel, but I'm going to ask you anyways. What other advice do you have for people looking to change careers into something aviation related?
Go talk to as many pilots and industry professionals as you can, because Google is great for getting answers, but you won't get insights from Google like you will from people. And so, my advice would be to copy me exactly. Create a channel, interview people, because it's how I learn.
Yeah,
it's how I make relationships. Like, for example, there's a survey company that has multi-engine aircraft. There was a Facebook group. They listed them on a low time pilots job board or something like that. So I put an application in. Well, I'm just like one application in a stack of God knows how many low time pilots who have applied.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing I did is I reached out to the guy that owns the company on LinkedIn, and I introduced myself and told him that I wanted to interview him on my channel. And oh, by the way, I've also applied for one of your jobs. So he naturally said, I'd love to do the interview with you. And I see we're both entrepreneurs. So he and I are going to get along like a house on fire because we both built companies.
Sure.
Where does my resume go on that stack? Up or down?
It's not going down, my friend.
No, it ain't going down. And now, if I don't have the show, can I reach out to him and say, I'd like to interview you on my show? No, I can't.
Right.
I can't reach out to him and say, okay, can I pick your brains for some free advice? Because that's really all being a host is.
Right.
No, I can't do that either because I don't have a show.
Right.
So being a content creator, when I say it opens doors, I really mean it. And so for other people who are thinking of Career 2.0, if you don't want to talk, then write, do something. Like, create some content in some way, shape, or form would be my best advice. If you're not willing to do that or not interested in doing that, because let's face it, not everybody is.
Mm-hmm.
Just be an airport rat. Find a reason, phone people up and say, I'm getting into aviation as a Career 2.0, and I would love to be able to buy you a coffee. I just want 15 minutes to ask you some questions and get your advice because you're an expert. You've been in this a long time. You know things that I don't know, and I think it'd be brilliant. A lot of people will say yes to that. Not everybody, but a decent number of them. And then when you're having that coffee, hey man, thank you so much. By the way, who else do you know that I should talk to? And they'll tell you to another friend and another friend and another friend and another friend and another friend.
That's great advice. Really is. So before we go, Trent, where can people find your channel? I mean, I think they should probably know where it is already, but...
Well, you can if you go to YouTube and type in Fly with Trent, I guarantee you'll find me. If you go to flywithtrent.com, you'll also find me. Or if you just type my name, because I have a very unique name, into Google, you'll also find me. I am not hard to find.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you sitting down with me and telling me not just about your story, but some of the things that you've learned through your content creation and working towards the airlines.
Well, thanks very much for making the time to have me on. And for the people who are still here at the very end listening, thank you all for investing the time. If you have questions, I'm sure they'd give me a link and I can come someplace and help answer the questions.
Yep, sure will. All right. Thanks, Trent. Well, thank you once again to Trent for joining me on this episode. Appreciate him taking the time out of his very busy schedule to chat with us about not just his journey, but some of his thoughts and ideas about making this career move. One thing I do want to point out that even though Trent's journey might not be the typical, he was very well positioned as far as how he's set himself up in life in general to make this move. There are still some similarities that are worth noting that have been a common theme with other guests as well. The support from family back home, where he's able to focus on his training because his wife's back on the home front being the real hero in this, he says. A common theme that we hear among a lot of guests. The other one is that networking and how important that is. Again, though he's in this space now of being able to leverage his social media and content creation presence, networking is still really important. He's able to use that to go, call people up and have an interview with them for his content, but then also make that connection. But I think even with that said, that he's able to leverage his content creation, that doesn't mean that, the average person trying to make a career change can't still use other avenues to network. He talked about just being at the airport and making connections there. And I mean, let's face it, you go to an airport and start talking to people about airplanes, we're going to talk to you. So I think that there's still a lot to be said about networking that you can take away, even if you're not necessarily set up in the same position to take advantage of being successful prior to aviation, to make that leap a little easier. If you are not already checking out Trent's stuff, you can reach out to him at flywithtrent.com. Got a ton of great stuff out there as far as pilot training, his videos, as well as links to his YouTube and all of his socials, as well as a way to contact him if you are interested in reaching out. I also have a link down in the show notes for you to check out if you want to just click on that to get right to his website. So on to talking about our next episode next time around, which I'm hoping is going to be in about 2 weeks from today. We will have on Aaron. Aaron went from the business world and working in cybersecurity to a career with the airlines. So we'll sit down with him. We'll hear about his past career as well as his journey to his new career in aviation. And real quick, if you enjoy what I'm doing here, please make sure that you like and subscribe to the podcast, as well as leave a rating and review wherever you're listening. It really helps to spread the word about the podcast. Or you can use good old-fashioned word of mouth as you're hanging out around the airport networking to try to get to your career 2.0. I certainly do appreciate all the help and the support that I've received from the members of our community. And if you want to reach out to me or you want to be a guest on a future episode, you can reach out to me on any of my social medias, which are down in the show notes, or you can email me at flythetransition@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
You've been listening to Fly the Transition. Life is too short for you not to do what you love. And our passion is to give you all the tools you need to make the transition from doing what you do to being in the aviation industry. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can reach out by email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at Fly the Transition. And the website for Flying Midwest Media is flyingmidwest.com. Keep soaring. See you next time on Fly the Transition.